A boy named Jack was reincarnated into another world. In his previous life, he was an ordinary office worker who worked a stressful 9-to-5 job. He had a decent salary and a comfortable life, but deep inside, he was never truly happy. Every day felt the same, and the endless pressure slowly drained his energy. Eventually, the stress became too much for him, and he died. After his death, Jack found himself standing in a strange white space. In front of him stood a mysterious man who introduced himself as the creator of the world. However, he preferred to call himself the manager of the solar system and all life on Earth. The god calmly informed Jack that he had died. Surprisingly, the god seemed kind and understanding. He knew that Jack had struggled during his life and had never found the happiness he was searching for. Feeling sympathy for him, the god decided to give him a second chance. The god chose to send Jack to a world filled with magic and adventure. Before sending him away, he granted him incredible physical abilities along with resistance to several forms of magic. As Jack's body slowly faded away, a bright light surrounded him. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself lying beneath a large tree in a completely different world. The first thing he felt was hunger. His stomach growled loudly as he stood up and looked around. A dense forest stretched endlessly in every direction. Hoping to find food, he began walking through the forest. After some time, he spotted a small village nearby. However, Jack quickly realized he had a problem. "I have no money." Luckily, one of the abilities given to him by the god was a skill called Search. The moment he activated it, several nearby plants and flowers began glowing with different colors. Curious, he approached a yellow flower. A floating screen suddenly appeared before his eyes. It displayed the flower's name, rank, and description. Excited, Jack began searching the forest for valuable items. While looking around, his eyes suddenly landed on a strange brown object. A rare stone? He wondered. He picked it up and examined it. A moment later, his face froze. It's animal poop! The object turned out to be a giant animal turd. However, what shocked him even more was its rank. It was rank C, much higher than most of the plants he had discovered. Although embarrassed, Jack decided to take it with him. When he arrived at the village, he entered a general store and awkwardly placed the huge oval-shaped turd on the counter. The shop owner stared at it for several seconds. Then his eyes widened. "This is incredible!" Jack was stunned when he learned that the turd was worth 5 gold coins, roughly equal to 50,000 yen or $300. He never expected animal poop to be so valuable. What shocked him even more was the shop owner's reaction. The man happily picked up the turd and began rubbing it on his face as if it were expensive facial cream. Apparently, it was a rare ingredient used for beauty products. The shop owner then asked if Jack had anything else to sell. Jack showed him all the plants and flowers he had gathered. After carefully inspecting them, the shop owner became even more excited. Every single one was a valuable healing herb. In total, he offered Jack around 3.6 million yen, equivalent to nearly $22,000. Jack almost fainted from shock. He had become rich within a single day. Before leaving, the shop owner made a special request. He wanted Jack to retrieve a rare ore hidden in the dangerous mountains to the east. Jack accepted the request. First, however, he rented a room at a nearby inn. After spending the entire day walking through the forest, he desperately wanted a bath. When a maid entered his room carrying only a small bucket of hot water, Jack looked confused. "What am I supposed to do with that?" The maid hesitated before explaining something surprising. In this world, only nobles were allowed to enjoy full baths. Commoners had to either clean themselves with small amounts of water or hire expensive sorcerers to wash them using magic. Jack blinked. Then he remembered something important. He was a sorcerer. Smiling, he thanked the maid, gave her a generous tip, and politely sent her away. Once alone, he summoned water with magic and cleaned his entire body without even removing or wetting his clothes. The next morning, he began his journey toward the eastern mountains. Along the road, he discovered the body of a fallen knight. Beside him was a small amulet. Inside it was a letter from the knight's younger sister. The letter begged him to come home safely and not risk his life trying to earn money. Reading the letter filled Jack with sadness. The knight had probably died while trying to support his family. Feeling respect for the man, Jack dug a grave and carefully buried him. He placed the letter beside him and silently prayed for his soul. That night, Jack set up camp. To stay safe, he created a magical barrier around his campsite to keep dangerous monsters away. Afterward, he cooked some meat over a fire and mixed it with tasty mushrooms he had gathered along the way. Using seasonings purchased from the inn, he prepared a surprisingly delicious meal. The next day, Jack reached a dark forest near the mountain. The trees were so thick that almost no sunlight could enter. Unable to see properly, he created a small artificial sun using fire magic. The glowing sphere floated above him and illuminated the entire area. While gathering herbs, Jack carefully moved through the darkness. Suddenly, the ground beneath him collapsed. Before he could react, he fell into a massive crack hidden beneath the forest floor. His heart nearly stopped. Fortunately, he quickly activated flying magic and safely floated down to the bottom. Looking around, he discovered a huge underground cave. Using search, he learned that the cave contained many valuable ores. Unfortunately, none of them were the ore he was looking for. Refusing to give up, he continued searching. Eventually, he noticed noticed something hidden deep inside a rock wall. Without hesitation, he launched a powerful fireball. The explosion shattered the rock into countless pieces. There, buried within the debris, was the ore he had been searching for. Mithril ore, a magical metal with an astonishing rarity of A+. Jack cheered with excitement. However, his discovery was far from over. While searching for an exit, he stumbled upon a crystal-clear pond deep inside the cave. The water was so pure and beautiful that it glowed like liquid light. Its radiance illuminated the entire cave. When Jack appraised it, he was left speechless. The pond was filled with magical water created from dragon fluids that had accumulated over thousands of years. Its rarity was ranked SS, far beyond anything he had found so far. The description warned that the water contained enormous amounts of magical energy and could cause severe magical poisoning. Even so, Jack hated the idea of wasting something so valuable. He considered taking a small sip. Suddenly, the entire cave shook violently. The surface of the pond exploded upward. A gigantic dragon emerged from beneath the water. Its scales shined like black gemstones, and its golden eyes stared directly at Jack. The dragon's name was Voldius. He had awakened after sensing an overwhelming magical aura coming from Jack. The energy surrounding the young man was so intense that it rivaled Voldius's own power. Yet when Jack casually claimed that he was merely an ordinary human, Voldius became completely confused. For the first time in centuries, the ancient dragon found himself questioning what exactly was standing before him. Voldius could clearly sense that Jack was far stronger than he looked. The amount of magical energy inside him was unbelievable. Because of this, the ancient dragon made an unexpected request. He asked Jack to help hatch his dragon egg. Normally, a dragon parent would hatch the egg themselves, but Voldius explained that his current magical power was not enough. The egg required an enormous amount of energy to awaken. In exchange, Voldius offered Jack a large amount of mithril ore. Jack was completely shocked. The ore was incredibly valuable, so he quickly agreed. Voldius summoned a large black dragon egg covered in glowing patterns. The dragon then instructed Jack to place both hands on the egg and pour all of his magical energy into its center. Jack followed the instructions. The moment his energy entered the egg, the entire cave shook violently. A blinding burst of light filled the cave. The magical energy being drained from him was so overwhelming that he almost lost consciousness. When the light finally faded, Jack slowly opened his eyes. Crack, crack. The egg had hatched. A tiny black dragon emerged from the broken shell. The hatchling immediately ran toward Jack and jumped into his arms. The little dragon rubbed its face against him affectionately and refused to let go. It seemed to believe that Jack was its father. Jack could only smile awkwardly. Voldius then gave him the honor of naming the newborn dragon. Jack thought carefully for a moment before coming up with a simple name. B. The baby dragon happily wagged its tail after hearing the name. To Jack's surprise, Voldius then ordered B to accompany him on his journey. The ancient dragon believed that Jack was even stronger than himself and could protect B far better than he ever could. Although Jack wanted to refuse such a huge responsibility, he couldn't bring himself to reject the dragon's trust. In the end, he accepted. After spending several hours searching for an exit, Jack and B finally escaped the underground cave. Once outside, Jack opened his storage bag and discovered several containers filled with magical water. They had been secretly placed there by Voldius as a farewell gift. The sky was already growing dark, so Jack decided to camp for the night. As they prepared dinner, Jack casually created a fire magic stone out of thin air. In this world, magic stones were incredibly rare treasures that people would pay fortunes for. Yet Jack created one as if it were nothing. Afterward, he used appraisal on B. The results surprised him. Despite being newly born, B already possessed all elemental magic attributes, extensive magical knowledge, and multiple blessings from the ancient dragon Voldius. Jack suddenly realized that his new companion might be a genius. The next morning, Jack climbed back to the surface without using flying magic. When he finally reached the top, he was surprised. The dark forest that had once seemed terrifying now looked bright and peaceful. His increased abilities allowed him to see details he could not notice before. Feeling relaxed, he began gathering herbs and useful materials. Suddenly, B became nervous and hid behind him. Jack immediately activated search. A screen appeared before him. Several hostile targets were detected nearby. Moments later, a gigantic bird resembling a flying chicken burst out from the trees. After using appraisal, Jack learned that the creature's meat was considered a rare delicacy. His eyes immediately lit up. Dinner had arrived. He quickly created a magical shield for protection before launching dozens of sharp ice crystals. The flying monster tried to dodge, but the crystals pierced its wings. The giant bird crashed into the ground. Before Jack could celebrate, a pack of wolves emerged from the forest. Instead of panicking, Jack became excited. This was the perfect opportunity to practice his combat magic. First, he activated flying magic. Then he used weight reduction magic to make his body lighter. His movements instantly became faster and smoother. Floating above the battlefield, Jack attacked the wolves one after another. Fire, ice, wind, earth. Different spells exploded across the battlefield. The wolves had no chance against him. Within minutes, every monster was defeated. However, search detected even even more monsters approaching from deeper within the forest. Jack began feeling exhausted. Seeing this, he grabbed Jack and tried to carry him into the sky. Unfortunately, Jack's weight reduction magic made him far lighter than expected. He accidentally flew too high. The little dragon lost his grip. Jack screamed as he fell from the sky. Crash! He smashed through countless tree branches before losing consciousness. When he finally opened his eyes again, he looked around in confusion. Somehow, he had completely crossed the forest. The accident had saved him several hours of travel. As they continued their journey, Jack noticed a small branch that had fallen from an ancient Yggdrasil tree. The moment he touched it, he released a gentle breath filled with life energy. The branch began glowing. Roots, leaves, and magical patterns spread across its surface. Within moments, it transformed into a beautiful magical staff. Jack stared at it in amazement. Soon afterward, they heard the sound of metal scraping against the ground. Following the noise, they discovered a collapsed elf woman. She looked exhausted, hungry, and close to death. The elf was so weak that she couldn't even introduce herself. Without hesitation, Jack took out a lunchbox and some water from his bag. The elf devoured the food immediately. Tears nearly formed in her eyes. She had not eaten anything for 3 entire days. After finishing the meal, she thanked him repeatedly. However, as she spoke, Jack noticed something unexpected. Her breath smelled terrible. At that moment, he realized that not all elves smelled like flowers. Some apparently smelled like wet dogs. The elf instantly became furious. Her face turned bright red with embarrassment. Before she could attack him, she remembered that she had urgent business to attend to. With an angry glare, she quickly ran away. Jack and Bee continued toward the village. When they returned to the general store, the owner was shocked after examining the mithril ore. This was no ordinary mithril. It was a high-grade magical mithril ore worth a fortune. The shop owner immediately realized that Jack's talents were being wasted in a small village. He gave him directions to a large city and recommended that he register at the Adventurers Guild. According to him, someone with Jack's abilities could become famous throughout the kingdom. Before leaving, however, Jack wanted to leave something behind for the villagers. Using several pieces of mithril ore, he crafted a magical lamp. The process took him the entire night. The next morning, he presented the lamp to the village guards. The lamp was enchanted with powerful protective magic. As long as it remained active, a barrier would surround the entire village and prevent dangerous criminals or monsters from entering. The villagers were overwhelmed with gratitude. After saying goodbye, Jack and Bee resumed their journey. Along the road, they encountered a giant crab-like monster blocking the path. Jack activated appraisal. Just like the giant bird, the crab was edible. His interest instantly doubled. Dinner had appeared once again. Jack strengthened his body using enhancement magic, while Bee unleashed a powerful supersonic wave. The shockwave slammed into the giant crab and knocked it backward. Unfortunately, several more giant crabs suddenly emerged from nearby rocks. Bee quickly grabbed Jack and lifted him into the air. The charging crabs crashed into one another, creating a chaotic pileup. Seeing the opportunity, Jack raised his newly created Yggdrasil staff. Using it like a baseball bat, he swung with all his strength. The first giant crab was launched through the air like a ball, crashing directly into the others. The battlefield instantly became complete chaos. As night fell, Jack decided to prepare dinner. Using his newly acquired staff, he cut apart the giant crab monsters and placed the meat into a large cooking pot. The rich aroma soon filled the campsite, making Bee drool uncontrollably while waiting for the food to finish cooking. After enjoying a satisfying meal, they rested for the night. The next morning, Jack finally arrived at the large city that the shop owner had told him about. However, as he approached the entrance, he noticed something concerning. The city gates had a strict inspection system. Every traveler was thoroughly searched before being allowed inside. Jack immediately became nervous. His special bag was one of his greatest secrets. If anyone discovered its true abilities, he would attract far too much attention. Not wanting any trouble, he used magic to disguise the bag and make it appear completely ordinary. When his turn arrived, the guards carefully inspected him from head to toe. They searched his belongings and checked his equipment. To Jack's relief, they found nothing suspicious. Still, something about the inspection bothered him. According to the god, he had been given extraordinary abilities. Curious, Jack secretly used appraisal on himself. A status screen appeared. To his surprise, his status looked completely normal. There were no visible special abilities, no legendary titles, and no high rank. Anyone who inspected him would see nothing unusual. Jack quickly realized that the god had probably hidden his true abilities from the world. For the first time since arriving in this world, he felt relieved. Living quietly might actually be possible. After entering the city, Jack headed straight for the Adventurers Guild. The building was enormous and filled with adventurers wearing armor and carrying weapons. As soon as he entered, many eyes turned toward him. At the reception desk, he met a bunny girl named Ariana. She welcomed him warmly and helped him register as an adventurer. While filling out the paperwork, Jack casually mentioned that he had already defeated several powerful monsters during his travels. Ariana immediately raised an eyebrow. Naturally, she asked for proof. Without thinking much about it, Jack reached into his special bag. Moments later, he pulled out the giant crab monsters he had defeated. The massive corpses crashed onto the guild floor. Silence filled the room. Every adventurer froze. Ariana's face turned pale. The guild master himself quickly came over after hearing the commotion. The sight of the giant monsters alone was shocking, but what truly caught his attention was Jack's seemingly limitless storage bag. The guild master carefully observed him. Using a special ability, he examined Jack's aura. A bright blue color surrounded him. Blue represented honesty, kindness, and a lack of malicious intentions. The guild master relaxed slightly. Although Jack was clearly unusual, he did not appear dangerous. The adventurers quickly became excited. Many of them wanted to recruit Jack into their parties. Someone capable of defeating monsters like these would be an incredible ally. Unfortunately for them, Jack had no interest in joining anyone. He preferred traveling alone. After completing all the paperwork, Ariana officially registered him. However, guild rules were strict. No matter how talented he appeared, every new adventurer had to begin at rank F, the lowest rank. Jack had no objections. In fact, he preferred it that way. The less attention he attracted, the better. Over the following weeks, Jack accepted various gathering requests. He collected herbs, hunted monsters, and gathered rare materials. Even though he could easily complete difficult missions, he intentionally avoided ranking up. He simply wanted a peaceful and quiet life. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. One day, alarms suddenly echoed throughout the city. A large monster attack was underway. All available adventurers were ordered to assist with the city's defense. Jack honestly didn't care much about fame or heroics. However, he couldn't ignore innocent people being hurt. Reluctantly, he joined the defenders. At the temporary base camp, he met a young healer named Muzero. She was only a low-rank adventurer, but she worked tirelessly to treat the wounded. Despite her exhaustion, she never stopped helping others. Jack couldn't help but admire her determination. Nearby, he also met a veteran lizardman warrior named Clay. The warrior was covered in scars and had clearly suffered serious injuries in previous battles. Even so, he was preparing to return to the battlefield. His only concern was protecting his people. Watching both of them risk their lives stirred something inside Jack. Perhaps helping others wasn't such a bad thing after all. He planted his staff into the ground and cast a powerful barrier around the base camp. The protective shield immediately strengthened the defenses. Afterward, he headed toward the battlefield. Countless goblins were attacking the city's forces. Not wanting to reveal his own strength, Jack ordered B to handle the enemies instead. The small dragon happily rushed into battle. Explosions, wind blades, and magical attacks instantly scattered the goblin army. Meanwhile, Jack moved deeper into the battlefield. There he found the Clay fighting alone against overwhelming numbers. His old injuries had already weakened him considerably. Jack could tell he wouldn't survive much longer. Then the goblin boss appeared. The enormous monster towered over the battlefield. Everyone froze. At that moment, Jack made a decision. He took out some of the magical dragon water gifted by Voldius. Without hesitation, he splashed it onto the Clay. Then he used magic to force the warrior's body to absorb the energy. The effect was immediate. The enormous magical power surged through the Clay's body. His muscles expanded. Scales covered his skin. Wings burst from his back. Within seconds, he transformed into a dragon-like warrior. The battlefield fell silent. The transformed Clay roared loudly. His new power overwhelmed the goblins completely. Even the goblin boss stood no chance. The monster army was wiped out. The city was saved. That night, the people celebrated their victory. However, the Clay couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. No ordinary human could perform such incredible magic. Eventually, he approached Jack privately. He wanted answers. What exactly was Jack? After a long silence, Jack decided to tell him the truth. He explained that he had died in another world and had been reincarnated into this one. At first, the story sounded completely absurd. The Clay struggled to believe it. Yet after witnessing everything Jack had done, the impossible suddenly seemed possible. In the end, he accepted the truth. More importantly, he promised never to reveal Jack's secret. The next morning, Jack wandered through the city marketplace. He wanted to buy a simple pair of scissors. To his surprise, none of the shops sold them. While he was searching, a female blacksmith noticed him. After listening to his request, she laughed. Apparently, scissors did not exist in this world. However, she claimed that her master, one of the city's most famous blacksmiths, could create such a tool. There was only one condition. The master blacksmith wanted Jack to complete a special request first. Curious about what kind of request could come from someone so famous, Jack decided to hear her out. The old blacksmith explained why he needed help. The rare material required to forge the special scissors could only be found inside a dangerous forest filled with monsters and demons. Countless adventurers had refused the request because the risk was simply too high. However, Jack wasn't worried. He immediately agreed to gather the materials and only asked the blacksmith to keep his promise and make the scissors afterward. The blacksmith happily handed him a map. Soon, Jack and Bee began their journey toward the infamous demon forest. Along the way, Jack unexpectedly ran into the elf girl he had met before. She seemed to be arguing with a merchant. merchant. The merchant was trying to sell her a giant white crow instead of a horse. Jack listened for a moment and learned that the elf was also heading toward the same destination. Neither of them paid much attention to the other, and they continued on their separate paths. A few hours later, Jack found her again. This time she was sitting under a tree in the middle of the forest. She looked exhausted, hungry, and frustrated. Feeling sorry for her, Jack offered some food and water. The elf gratefully accepted. Unlike before, she didn't run away afterward. Instead, she introduced herself properly. Her name was Val, and she was a high elf. Wanting to repay Jack for helping her multiple times, Val decided to accompany him on his journey. Unfortunately, her gathering skills were terrible. Whenever she searched for herbs, she either found poisonous plants or completely useless weeds. Jack couldn't help but laugh. As night fell, Val volunteered to prepare firewood. Rather than using Jack's valuable magic stones, she dragged back a massive log from the forest. With incredible speed and precision, she sliced the entire thing into perfectly shaped pieces. Watching her strength and knife skills left Jack impressed. At that moment, he decided to unofficially hire Val as his bodyguard. Having someone else deal with dangerous monsters sounded much easier than fighting them himself. The next morning, Jack visited a restaurant before continuing his journey. To his surprise, he met the clay warrior there. The clay immediately became angry. Jack had left the city without even saying goodbye. When he learned that Jack planned to risk his life gathering rare ores just to get a special pair of scissors made, he was completely speechless. The clay thought Jack was far too trusting and worried that people would continue taking advantage of him. Unable to ignore his concerns, he decided to join the journey as well. Now Jack's party consisted of himself, a high elf, and a powerful clay warrior. As they continued toward their destination, they eventually reached the famous city of dwarves. The city was built beneath an enormous mountain. Thousands of visitors came every year, creating huge lines at the entrance. Fortunately, the clay personally knew the dwarf king. After speaking with the guards, the entire group was allowed to skip the line and enter immediately. Jack was amazed by what he saw inside. The city stretched throughout the interior of the mountain. Massive tunnels connected different districts, while giant exhaust fans had been installed along the walls to circulate air. The entire place felt like a gigantic underground fortress. Soon they met the dwarf king Zoro. Jack quickly learned that Clay had once saved the dwarves from a powerful demon. Because of that heroic act, many dwarves treated him like a legendary hero. After receiving permission, the group entered the restricted caves where the rare ores could be found. Inside, they encountered several low-level monsters. Jack immediately stepped aside and allowed his two bodyguards to deal with them. Why waste energy when someone else could do the work? However, things became serious when a giant crab monster appeared. And that's where this video ends. If you want more parts of this anime recap, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.